Hi everyone, it's Mari here for Honeybee Stamps. I'm going to be creating this card for you today to create just a really soft and delicate looking card. I am going to be using the gorgeous Eternal Love stamp and coordinating die set. This was designed by Dawn Holslegel for Honeybee Stamps. I have stamped out one of the main floral images here onto the smooth side of some watercolor paper, and I did use just a waterproof ink. I'm also going to be using some Karen markers today, or Kareen. I don't really know what the proper way is to say that, but we do sell these in the Honeybee shop, which is very awesome. I am using, first of all, I started off using a little plastic palette over to the side, but I wasn't super happy with how the ink was transferring onto that surface. So I do end up having better success with my glass mat, just an FYI. I think a craft mat would work really well as well, but the plastic didn't, I couldn't transfer the pigment on there quite as well. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm starting off with some clear water on my watercolor paper. This is a wet on wet technique that I'm using here. I'm not using the marker directly to the paper, although you can do that. That is not the technique that I'm using to watercolor here today. Now I'm starting off with the lightest color of marker. This one is Skin 1, and it's just a really, really nice pale, kind of a corally pink. And so I'm kind of going for a corally pink toned rose here for both of the florals. Or are these peonies? I'm not sure, but they're beautiful. Whatever florals they are, I absolutely love them. I feel like they might be roses though, just because of maybe the shapes of the leaves, but I'm not 100% sure. So once I've got the entire flowers covered with the lightest color of pink, then what I'll do is I'll start to build some depth in the color by going in with the next darkest color of my markers. And I will be sure to list the markers that I've used in the description box below, but I'm using Skin 1, Skin 2, Rose Pink, and a little bit of Burgundy. So as I work the next darker color up from lightest to darkest, I'm just going in and deepening up the shadows. And so with this second color, I'm just going in with, I'm kind of going up the flower a little bit farther. And then as the color gets darker, I tend to recede into the creases and finer areas a little bit more, if that makes sense. So here you can just see I'm using the lines that Dawn has provided when she designed these florals to be where I'm going to put the shading. So that is really helpful when you have those lines on the petals that kind of suggest where the shadows should be. I am not a professional colorist, obviously, but I do really love this. I really enjoy watercoloring, and I love using the Karen markers because they just work really well. So they're a really great option, and you can use them in a ton of different ways. I'm sure you've seen other creatives using them in a variety of different ways, or using different techniques. Now, I am trying to just really use the tip of the paintbrush here. This happens to be a silver paintbrush, which does have quite a nice fine tip on the end, and that does make it quite a bit easier to get into those smaller areas. But you can just see I'm just patiently building up the darker colors. And really, I'm not actually letting this dry in between. So that is something that it is helpful if you do when you're watercoloring, if you let one area dry and then you go on to another area. For the sake of creating a video like this, which is kind of a shorter video, it's not like a complete sort of lengthy technique video. I'm not letting it dry completely in between adding the different colors. So they are blending together a little bit rather than, completely layering. This is that darkest color, that burgundy, and I am going to use that into the deepest areas. So I feel like probably the darkest area here is going to be right there, where I'm working there, where all of the petals are sort of like really compacted and tight. That's going to be pretty dark there. And then also some of the areas where the petals meet, I am adding a little bit of that darker burgundy color as well. Now, one thing that you will find if you use black ink is sometimes you will, the because of its paper, after all this, it's going to degrade to a certain extent, even watercolor paper. You might find that your black lines start to kind of degrade a little bit. So when I stamped this, I actually kept my stamp in my MISTI in exactly the same spot. And you'll see how I darken up my ink lines as I finish up and go back. Now I'm going back to the lighter color, and I'm just blending things out a little bit. I'm blending up onto the petal, and I'm trying to retain some of the white space on the petals as well, where I want it to obviously look like the light might be hitting it. Although, this isn't a perfect science as far as light and darks for sure, but I'm trying to be mindful of leaving some white space or very light space at any rate. Now I'm using the exact same technique for the leaves. I'm using the color grass, and I'm adding water, just clear water to the leaves, and then going in with the pigment. And I'm actually also using some neutral gray 1 for adding some darker shadowy areas because I didn't have a dark green color. And so to help add sort of some shadowy areas, that's why I'm using the gray. And that actually works pretty well. And it tones down the brightness of the green a little bit as well. I didn't want the green to be really super bold because this is just a really pretty soft pink. And I wanted the look of the card to definitely just be really soft and really vintagey looking for sure. That was the look I'm going for here with this entire project. So you'll just see me picking up some of the gray and just dropping that in onto the leaves to create that kind of a more muted look, and also maybe just that hint of a little bit of a shadow. So that made sense in my mind. I don't know. I think it looked okay when I finished. So I like how it's turning out and how it's looking. Now I'm happy with my colored image at this point. I've put this back into my MISTI exactly where it was before. I'm going in with that VersaFine Clair ink or Nocturne ink, and I'm stamping that out. Now this is a pigment ink. It dries super fast. So I'm also going to add some clear embossing powder over top, and that is going to just really make the lines nice and shiny. Now, if you really wanted to work on the vintage look of this, I feel like you probably could do some no-line watercoloring here and take away that harsh edge of the ink. But I didn't mind the look of that, and I really love the color of the color choices that I chose here. Now, there is a coordinating die, so you can die cut that out, and it just creates this beautiful piece for your project. This is a brand new paper pad from our last release called Textiles and Textures Vintage. Amazing. I love it. I love this piece here. It looks like a lace over a burlap kind of a look. It's gorgeous. I've sized that down for my A2 size card front. And I'm also going to use the gorgeous eyelet lace embossing folder. I have embossed a piece of A2 size white cardstock, but I'm just going to use a strip of it. And that's going to be a place for me to have a landing spot for those florals. Now, this is another paper from that same paper pad that kind of has a linen look to it. It's gorgeous. And I'm just going to tear this so that I reveal that white core. And I'm going to just kind of like really distress the edge, fold it up and bend it up a little bit. And I'm going to add that to a little piece of that, or that piece of the eyelet embossing that I've created there already, and just layer these two pieces together. And then actually what I do is I take that to my sewing machine and I add a little bit of sewing on that, and I'll show you that here in a second. So we're going to just go ahead and get this piece added to our card front. I actually did size this down just 1/4 of an inch smaller than my A2 size card base. And so I do have that little bit of a white margin around that first layer. And there you can see that sewing. And now I've used this spring greenery die, which I love so much. And I've also used the Lovely Layers Heart Vines. So those two dies I have cut from vellum and white cardstock. You can just see how gorgeous that works. Do you know what I did when I die cut the vellum? I actually put the vellum onto a piece of white cardstock behind it, and then ran it through my die cutting machine just to make sure that it cut the vellum nicely without doing any harm to the vellum. Now I'm just taking my floral piece. I have it in my splat box. I'm just splatting some white paint on there. Now I'm just taking a fine black gel pen and I'm just dotting in a little bit of detail onto the floral, just here and there, just to add a little bit more texture to that floral. Now I'm just going to go in with my liquid adhesive and go ahead and adhere this down onto my project, basically kind of in the middle, maybe a little bit lower. I've got some foam adhesive on the back of that floral piece. I'm going to adhere that on with the heart vines die behind it. And now you can see the placement that I've chosen for these beautiful little vellum leaves. I did trim the bottom of the stem down on these vellum leaf pieces that are from the spring greenery set. I just trimmed them down just a little bit so that they just fit in, tuck in nicely behind my pieces here so I can layer them in, just using a little bit of liquid adhesive to layer those in there. And now you can just see how pretty and soft this is. Now I'm going to stamp out the sentiment from using our intense black ink. I am using a sentiment from Eternal Rose. The font in that set is stunning and the sentiments are beautiful. They're just so lovely. And so I've die cut that with a coordinating die. I'm using a little bit of foam adhesive, a foam strip on the back of the sentiment just to bump this up a little bit. If you don't like doing that, if you don't like using foam adhesive, you can just die cut the sentiment piece multiple times from white cardstock and layer those together, and really you can get the same effect. Now I'm using some holiday pearl stickers from the Holiday Pearls. These are just the white pearls, and I wanted to add those for an even more vintage look. Friends, all of the products that I've used today for this project are listed in the description box below. You can find everything in the Honeybee shop. I'm really happy with how this card turned out today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you were inspired, and I hope you have a chance to create soon. I will see you again next Friday. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.